CFO is pending, and it serves as proof of allocation. Deed of assignment is also crucial for secondary sales and showing signs of ownership. It means that there are different documentations and they have their own different strength and quote and unquote weaknesses. But it's not as if one documentation is better than the rest. And in your course of discussing with clients and suggesting of me, I'm not interested in it, or I cannot buy it. And you should not be upset about the client. In fact, you should not even feel discouraged, because most times clients talk and they discuss with you based on the knowledge that they have, which is why it is very, very important for you to be knowledgeable about documentation. Because if you are knowledgeable about something, you cannot have an informed conversation with the client and walk them through the fact that, look, CFO is good, it's safe, and it is more widely accepted than deed of assignment, excision, and all that. But in reality, CFO is not the safest, it's not the only safe documentation that you can have. You walk them through how a deed of assignment is also a legal back. You walk them through several documentation types and why they can actually still buy a property or invest in a property even though it doesn't have a CFO at the moment. You can even say that, look, this property has XYZ documents at the moment, but I can even gives you more confidence, if that gives you more, if it makes you more rest assured to go ahead with the transaction. So understanding property documentation, as I said earlier, is not just for your clients alone. It's not just for everybody else. It's also for you. Even you as a real estate agent that wants to, maximize information, it is important for you to know these things so that when conversations come up, you are not looking lost. You are not looking like you don't know what you're talking about. So very quickly, because of our time, I'm going to try and, breeze through the different types of documentation, and I'll try as much as possible to break them down in understandable concepts. As Dr. Shala said last week, when we are trying to explain to clients, it's not about using the fanciest of words, it's about talking to clients in a way that they can understand. So what I try to do during my classes is that it's not about using fancy words or trying to, explain it in the most complex. It's about breaking it down. So you'll be seeing that most of the explanations that I make, you'll be seeing that most of the, when I'm trying to break down the documentation titles, they'll be as understandable as possible. So the first one I'm going to talk about today is the different types of real estate documents, and we're going to be starting with the CFO. So CFO needs no introduction. Anybody that, even most people that are not in the real estate space, they know about a certificate of occupancy, which is a legal document issued by the government proving legal ownership or occupation of land. Now, what that means is that it is a document given by the government to prove that, yes, this person actually owns this land. And as far as Nigeria is concerned, is the most secure document type. Now, most clients are more comfortable with the CFO because they believe, emphasis on belief, that it is the best documentation that they can get. And if a property doesn't have it, it means that the property is not safe. But during the course of this class, you'd also be seeing other type of documentation, and you'll be seeing that they are also safe, they're also reliable. It just depends on the client's budget, and it depends on, the point of processing that the land is at the moment. But what most people actually don't know is that there are different types of CFO. Now, the first one is a statutory CFO, which is issued by the state government and is recognized nationwide. It's usually for high value land, freehold or leasehold. Now, the first one is statutory CFO. It is actually given by the state government, right? And it's usually for, urban areas, it's for freehold or for leasehold. Now, the customary CFO, as I said earlier, the first one is the statutory CFO. It is issued by the state government. But there's another type, which is also the customary CFO. It is issued by local or traditional authorities. It is common in urban areas and it is legally recognized but may require verification. What that means is that inside CFO still there again. And the more recognized one is the statutory CFO, but the other one is a customary CFO. So even as CFO is as widely accepted, there are still different types of CFO. And why does the CFO matter? The CFO matters because it helps for proof of ownership. As I said earlier, it is the most widely recognized documentation. And if you have a CFO on your property, it needs no introduction. It's something that can be easily, verifiable. Now, the second thing is that it makes land easier to transfer legally. as I've been saying for the last 30 or 35 minutes, most people are more comfortable with a C of O than they are with any type of documentation. So if a property has a C of O, it makes it easier, for people to transfer the property legally. Now, another thing is that it shows government recognition, reducing risk of disputes. Now, what it means by showing government recognition is that you notice that most times when people buy properties and then things get a little funny down the line, most times it's because of poor documentation. Other times it's because most people have bought properties that are, government that government has interest in. And if you have a C of O, it means that the government is aware of the property and the government actually documents the property on your behalf. So there's little or no risk for a government interference that can now cause issues for your property. So most people are most comfortable with the property because the government cannot come and interfere or snatch the property that they gave approval for. For example, in the city of Ibadan at New Garage, we are building, for most of you that don't know, we are building OMM, Oliole Modern Market, and it's actually a PPI, which is a public-private initiative. It means that the project is in alliance, is in partnership with the government. The government cannot come tomorrow and say they don't know about the project. They cannot say that because they are literally in partnership with us for the construction of the project. So most people are keen into OMM, not because we are building a market space. They are keen to because they know the government is aware of it. They know that the property is safe. So another reason why documentation is important and COO is considered the safest of them all is not because it's the COO, it's because most people know that the government knows about the project. Most people know that the government knows about the property. So there's a reduced risk of government interference. There's a reduced risk of the government waking up the next day and saying, look, we don't know about this property. So a C of O actually shows government recognition and reduces the risk of dispute. Now, what's the difference between the statutory C of O and the customary C of O? Now, statutory C of O is nationwide. It's preferred by banks. It is expensive, it is slower, and it's for urban or high region areas. While a customary C of O is usually for local recognition, it is cheaper and faster, and it's for rural areas. So, as I said earlier, even as the C of O is the most widely recognized one, there are two types, which is the statutory or the customary C of O. The statutory one is nationwide, it's preferred by banks. In case you want to take a loan or you want to sell your property, it's for expensive and urban areas. While the customary one is for local recognitions, it's cheaper, it's faster, and it might need extra, verification. So that'll be all of C of O. Now, the next document we're going to move on to is the government gazette. Now, a government gazette. What is a gazette? Now, most of us, as I said earlier, we just use these words. We try to, make ourselves seem very knowledgeable, but we don't really know what these things actually mean at the core. So I'll be breaking down what a government gazette is today. A government gazette is a public record published by the government to officially communicate legal notices, including land ownership, allocations, or is practically, please, can you put off your mic, please? Thank you so much. Communicate legal notices, including land ownership, allocations, or approval. Now, a gazette it can also be used in the place if a C of O is not issued yet. A gazette can be used. Now, I'll be giving us a couple of reasons why a gazette is important. Now, it acts as a legal evidence of land allocation, even if the C of O is not yet issued. It means that if a C of O is not yet issued, a gazette could also stand in the place of it because it's also a recognized title, and it means that the government is also aware of the property. So in a property that does not have a C of O but has a gazette, it still has legal backing, it's still safe and profitable to buy. So you can also tell your client that, look, this property does not have a C of O yet, but a gazette is also a recognized documentation by the government. It's a public record. It's something you can easily go and verify. So even if a C of O is not available on the land yet, as long as the property has a gazette, it's also safe to purchase, the property. Now, the second reason is that it's useful in fast-growing areas where documentation may lag behind because of allocation. Now, we need to also understand that a C of O is great, it's profitable, it's safe, but it's also very time consuming. Now, most people don't know that it takes a couple of months, sometimes years, for a seed. And in the meantime, in the interim, it means that there has to be other documentation that the client can have, to feel safe, to feel like, they can buy the property. So a gazette is actually an interim document that can be issued in the place of while a C of O is being processed. So even if a property is taking time for a C of O to come out, as long as it has a gazette, it is safe and it is profitable, for you to buy the property. A gazette can also help resolve dispute because it is publicly recognized. So most documentations are things that you have to go and spend a lot of time doing verification for. But a gazette, as I said earlier, is a public record. So it's something that you can literally walk into the government parastatals, that are in charge of those documentations, and you can actually get access to them. So it's nothing hidden. It makes things easier because the records are, if the property is what it actually says that it is. Now, the gazette can also help resolve dispute because it is publicly recognized. I think I said that before. And if a property has been gazetted, it means that the owner can start development or sale before receiving the C of O. So what that means is that a gazette is an interim document. Not all properties are going to have C of O. Documentation is easier to get in Ibadan as opposed to Lagos. It means that if, for example, if you buy a property in Lagos or you invest in a property in Lagos, the C of O might not come out as quickly as you'd like. But if it's already gazetted, it means that you could start building, you start development, you could do anything you want on your property as long as it is gazetted. You'd even be surprised that most of the properties that people are building on today, they don't even have a perfect C of O. These properties have been there for 20, 30 years, and they're actually publicly recognized by the government. So it's not the property has a C of O before you can say, oh, this property is safe to buy, regardless of the documentation that a property has at any point in time. As long as it is a legal document, there's always an opportunity to upgrade the documents that you have. So next time you are discussing with your clients, you're trying to make them see your standpoint, you're trying to help them understand that it's not just about C of O alone. There are several other documents, there are several other titles that are also recognized by the government and also make the property safe, for purchase. Now, the next one we'll be going on to, because of our time, is the deed of assignment or conveyance. The deed of assignment. Most of you that sell properties for Landnest, you would see that deed of assignment is a deed of assignment is a document that you'll be seeing a lot of times. Once we give you your contract to sale, your survey, either a provisional survey, and we actually give you a deed of assignment. So a deed of assignment is something that you'll be very familiar with as long as you sell for Landnest. So we'll be diving into what a deed of assignment really is and what it actually means. Is it a safe title? Does it make the property profitable? Can the client go ahead and buy a property if he has a deed of assignment? Will the government come for my property tomorrow if I don't buy, if I don't upgrade my document immediately? So very quickly, we'll be trying to define what a deed of assignment is. Now, a deed of assignment is a legal document that formally transfers ownership of land from one person to another. I'll go over it again. A legal document that formally transfers ownership of land from one person to another. Now, why does it matter? Because it shows change of ownership, reducing risk of fraud. Now, as I said earlier, real estate is a low trust environment. I cannot stress it enough. And the reason why I keep stressing this is because you need to have this mindset when you are discussing with people. You need to have this mindset when you are marketing. You need to have this mindset when you are trying to convince somebody. Understand that you don't expect them to trust you at first. People are not stupid. They know that real estate scams exist. They have social media. They've seen their friends and their families buy properties, and something happens down the line. So don't expect them to trust you. Expect them to trust documentation. You cannot refute facts. You cannot refuse something that is evidential. So understand that a deed of assignment helps you to see the chain of ownership and it reduces risk of fraud. They can actually see the transfer of documents from Mr. A to Mr. B. They can check the previous owners of the land. They can go and do their own background check. So understand that a deed of assignment shows the chain of ownership and reduces the risk of fraud. Now, this is essential in secondary market sales. Now, what that means is that, for example, if Landnest as an entity buys the property and your client wants to buy the property from Landnest, it means that Landnest also has to do a legal transfer from us, Landnest as a company, to your own client. So a deed of assignment is practically the process of that transfer. Because it's a secondary sale. If we buy the property from somebody and we're also selling to you, it means that that sale is not a primary sale, it's a secondary sale. Now, deed of assignment is the legal document that says, look, this property belonged to Landnest Homes and Properties before, but now it belongs to Mr. XYZ, it belongs to Mr. Toby, it belongs to Mr. Kayode. It is the legal transfer of that document that is called the deed of assignment. So understand that deed of assignment is also a legal document. If you buy a property that has a deed of assignment, as long as it is properly documented and there's no issues of fraud or government interference, it is also a legally recognized title. Another thing is that it provides proof of legal transfer for future registration of the C of O. Now, people like the C of O, but they don't know how much work it takes to actually get it done. And the deed of assignment is actually one of the documents that is required, for a C of O to get processed. It takes a very long time, but a deed of assignment is also one of the documents it takes for a C of O to be processed. Meaning that if you have a deed of assignment, you are already on track to get a C of O. Combined with other documents, you can now get proper documentation to actually upgrade to the C of O that you feel most comfortable with. Now, there's also a downside to the deed of assignment. Not a downside per se, but if you are dealing with a deed of assignment, you should always verify the previous owner's legal rights before completing the sale. Meaning that a deed of assignment can also be tricky. You don't have to just go to bed or go to sleep because a property has a deed. If a property has a deed and is a secondary sale, it means that there's a transfer of land from somebody that bought from somebody else. It means that you're a third party in the whole situation. But a deed of assignment actually shows clearly the previous owners of the land, and the people that are transferring the document to you. So if you're a smart real estate agent or you're doing a real estate transaction, you could actually check to say, oh, this person owned this property before, and now this person wants to sell this property to me. Does this person have the legal right to sell this property? The previous owners of the land. You can go and find out if the property has disputes. You can go and find out if the person that wants to sell the property to you is even in a position to sell it. So a deed of assignment actually helps you to properly track the movement of a land between individuals. And because of our time, we have to move very quickly. The third thing I'll talk about today is governor's consent. Governor's consent. Now, a governor's consent is a formal approval issued by the state government allowing transfer of government leased land to an owner. I'll go over it again. Is a formal approval issued by the state government allowing transfer of government leased land to a state owner. So a governor's consent is also a title that is recognized, right? Government. It means that the government is allowing the transfer of a government leased land to a new owner. It means that the government is aware of it. A governor's consent is also a very important documentation that you could, give your client. A very important documentation that you could give your client, to make them, to tell them that, look, this document is actually safe. This document is actually, it can help you go ahead with the transaction. It doesn't have to be just a C of O. A governor's consent is also something that, could make a client feel safe about making a purchase. Now, why is a governor's consent important? It's important because without it, a sale may not be legally recognized. Without a governor's consent, a sale might not be legally recognized. Now, the second thing is that it protects both the buyer and seller from future legal issues. As I said earlier, documentation is the life, it is the blood of any transaction. You should not be going into transactions that you don't know about the documentation. So a governor's consent actually protects the buyer and the seller from having any type of legal issues. And a governor's consent is also required before mortgaging, selling, or developing government land. So a governor's consent is actually you getting a government leased land. They're transferring the ownership to you. And before you can mortgage it, before you can sell it, before you can develop it, you have to have a governor's consent. So a governor's consent is actually a legal backing, a legal documentation for government approved or government recognized land. Now, for example, if a seller has a C of O, selling a government leased land without governor's consent can invalidate the transaction. It means that in as much as the C of O is bulletproof, if you are selling a government leased land without consent, it can invalidate the transaction. So understand that governor's consent on its own is also a legal document. Is almost as powerful as the C of O, because if you are selling a government leased land and you don't have the problem tomorrow. So the idea of saying that, look, a property has a C of O and it means that it's bulletproof, I don't have anything to worry about, it is false. Because if it is a government leased land and it does not have a governor's consent, it could lead to trouble down the line. Now, the next thing I want to talk about today is survey plan, survey plan slash surveyor's report, survey plan slash surveyor's report. Now, a survey is actually very, very important because a survey shows the boundary. For example, in a piece of land, if you look at it, you cannot really say which of it is your own until it is properly demarcated. So a survey plan is actually a demarcation of a land space so that you can know exactly where your portion is, in the whole piece of land. Now, a survey is a map or a diagram prepared by a licensed surveyor showing exactly boundaries, dimensions, and layout of a land plot. I'll go over it again. It is a map or a diagram prepared by a licensed surveyor, emphasis on a licensed surveyor, showing a. Now, why does it matter? It matters because it is needed for C of O application. You cannot apply for a C of O if you don't have a survey, because they don't even know the boundary of your land. They don't know the dimension of the land. They don't know exactly to document a property, right, in Lagos, and they are going to, the surveyor's office to, chart out a property. They might not want to physically follow you to the land. So it means that you have to bring a survey so that they can chart it from where they have to know exactly where this property is located, exactly the dimensions of this property. So it helps you to show that, okay, this is exactly where my land is. This is exactly the dimension of my land. This is evidence that my land is not encroaching into somebody else's land. So a survey is very, very important because it is needed for C of O application. If you want to process a C of O, you need a survey. Another reason is that it helps to avoid boundary disputes. So if you are been in the real estate business for a long time, you'd understand that most times some boundaries of some properties encroach into some people's own, and you might not even know except you see it on the survey. So, for example, if there's a large expanse of land shared by many family members, some people might have land or properties that encroach into other people's own, and these things become very obvious. These things become very obvious when you have a survey, because exactly the dimension of a property. So it's your it helps you properly say that, look, this is where this person's land ends, and if it goes beyond here, it means that there's a problem. So even if you are selling a property to somebody, ensure that the property has a survey, so that you can go and check and say that, look, this land that I'm buying, this is exactly where they say that the land is, and this is evidence that everything that is said in the documentation of the land in the deed is actually reflecting on the survey, that was given to my client. So a survey helps you to know the exact boundaries, of a particular property. Another thing that is useful for planning construction or development. So I mean, if a construction or development is about to be constructed, the survey helps us to know exactly where the project will be. It helps us to know landmarks. It helps us to know that, look, this project is going to go from this place to this place. It just helps you to properly know how a project will be structured, because the dimensions is contained there, the boundaries are contained there. So it actually gives us a guideline, to the size of a project, to the areas where a project is going to extend to, and all of that. So a survey actually helps you to plan and construct properly. Now, a survey tip is not proof of ownership, right? So a survey tip is a document in itself, but it is not documentation per se, because it actually shows proof of measurement. It means that it shows you the size of a property. It shows you, the location of a property, shows the dimension of a property, but it is not a proof of ownership. It means that if they give you a survey and they say, this is the survey of the land, it doesn't now mean that they are the owners of the land. It just shows you the boundary of the land. It shows you the size of the land, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the person that issued you a survey is actually the owner of the land. Now, the last thing we'll talk about today because of our time is excision. Excision. The last thing we're talking about today, because of our time, is excision. Excision. Now, what is an excision? An excision is a government is when the government officially removes land from acquisition plans, making it available for private ownership. An excision is when a government officially removes land from acquisition plans, making it available for private ownership. An excision is practically when you just remove a part from a whole. It means that when a government actually gives a portion, and allows it open, it makes it open for acquisition. And especially in Lagos, most times you see that most of the properties that are available in Lagos are actually excision based properties. And excision is also a very strong title. Most people are comfortable with a C of O and are comfortable with a governor's consent, but an excision is also a very solid, documentation that the land can have. And why does an excision matter? An excision matters because it gives legal recognition for private ownership even without immediate C of O. It means that if a property does not have a C of O at the moment, as long as it has, you know, an excision, it is also legally recognized. Now, the second thing is that it is common in urban areas, especially for new developments. So, if a new development is taking place in a particular axis, you notice that most times it is an excision that this property has. So, C of O is good. It is, to most Nigerians, is a bulletproof title, but there are also other documentations that are also very important. For example, excision is also good because it is, it is very important for new developments. Now, another thing about an excision is that it is often cheaper and faster than waiting for statutory C of O. As I said earlier, getting a C of O takes time, it takes money, and it takes energy. And in Lagos, it takes connections. So an excision is also a document that can be used in the interim when you don't have, your C of O readily available. An excision is just practically when the government just gives a particular piece of land, for acquisition basis, and it makes it available for private ownership. Now, a tip for excision is that you should always check all the supporting documents for an excised land. So if they say that, oh, this property is the government that gave it to us, it's the government that did this, the government that did that, usually they're always supporting documents to prove that. So if they say that property is excised, if they say that property is, they got an extension from the government, it's your duty as a real estate agent to say, okay, no problems with that. Can you show me evidence to prove that this documentation came from the government? Can you show me evidence to prove that the government actually gave you this, property, that the government actually excised, this property? So the last one we're talking about is I just added this one, I don't think is that's serious since we sell most of our properties are landed properties, but this one is about tenancy agreements, right? Tenancy agreements. A tenancy agreement is a legal contract between a landlord and tenant outlining terms of renting a property. So a legal document between a landlord and a tenant outlining terms of renting a property. Now, why does the tenancy agreement matter? Now, it matters because it protects the both landlord and the tenant rights. So, as a landlord, the tenancy agreement is important because it states what you are expected to give the client, and it states what the client will get. So, in the future, if there's any issues, right? If there's any, you know, um, challenges, it is easy for you to say, look, this is the contract that I gave to you. This was what I promised to give you, and this was what I promised that you get by the, by using this property. So a tenancy agreement actually protects the tenant. It also protects the landlord. Now, the second thing is that it is useful for income properties or temporary use. So a tenancy agreement is very, very useful for income properties or temporary use. So if you are going to be renting a space for a period of time, a shop space or whatever, you are also going to be having to get a tenancy agreement, which is a contract between you and your landlord, stating what you are going to get by using the property and what the landlord is supposed to give to you on the basis of him renting out the property to you. Now, the another important factor is that it outlines duration, rent, and responsibilities. Now you need to understand that if a property is being rented to you, it doesn't mean that you cannot do whatever you want. It is literally a lease, and there are guidelines that ensure a smooth operation between the tenants and the landlord. So what that means is that if a property, is being rented to you, there are guidelines. You don't just do whatever you want. And these guidelines are stated, right, in the, you know, tenancy agreement. So they outline the duration. It means that they outline how long you are going to use the property for. They outline the rent, meaning that they outline how much you are going to have to pay. They outline responsibilities, which means they outline the things you are supposed to do, on the basis of using that property. So it is very important that you understand tenancy agreement so that you and your landlord, or you and the person that leases the property to you, don't have issues, in the future. Now, a tip for tenancy agreement is that, you know, it is a real estate documentation, even if it's not about ownership. It doesn't mean that you are going to outrightly own a property, but a tenancy agreement is actually a form of documentation, because it actually states that you have legal rights to own a property for a specific period of time. So even if it's not on the same scale as excision or governor's consent or C of O, a tenancy agreement is actually also a legal document, because it actually tells the government, or it tells anybody in position of authority, that you actually have legal rights. You have a right to be in a property that you are currently in. So that'll be all for today as regards, real estate documentation and all that. So I'm going to quickly do a quick recap on everything that I said so far. So I started with real estate documentation. I spoke about why it was important. I spoke about why knowledge of documentation is important to you as a real estate broker, because it protects your interest. You also protect the client's interest. I also spoke briefly about I also spoke about which of the documentation is best, and C of O, excision, gazette, deed of assignment, and all that. Like, which of this is best? And there's always a discussion of, if something doesn't have a C of O, it means that it's unsafe, which is incorrect. Different documentations at different stages of development of the property, and documents can always be upgraded. So it's not really about having one type of document, right? It's about understanding that, look, a property might have a particular documentation today. It doesn't mean that it's unsafe. These documentations can be upgraded over time. I also spoke about different types of real estate documents. I spoke about C of O, certificate of occupancy. I spoke about the government gazette. I spoke about deed of assignment. I spoke about the governor's consent. I also spoke about the survey, excision, as well as the lease and tenancy agreements. So that's the quick recap of what we spoke about today. For those that joined the call late, the call is also being recorded. So during the course of your day, you could also listen in at your convenience. Thank you very much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tide. That was a really beautiful one. So for people that might have questions, because of our time, can we have just one person ask their question? And if any other person has a question, they can drop it on the group so that it can be answered through the course of the day. Do we have anybody that has a question? All right, we're taking just Mr. David Olojede. And every other question, please drop it on the group and it will be attended to in the course of today. So Mr. Olojede, you have the floor.
Okay, good morning, everyone.
Good morning, sir.
My question this morning: how do you identify if the documents? How do you identify a fake document when presented?
Mr. Tide, did you get that?
Yes, you say, how do you identify a safe document?
Yes.
So now, okay, I'll say this. It depends on the document. For example, if you are being issued like a survey, for example, I always advise that if somebody gives you a survey, you should always have like an independent surveyor outside of the company that is issuing you a survey, that can help you do background checks. Now, a surveyor is practically focused mainly on survey, but they usually have like an extensive network of people that can help you properly document. Usually documentation, on average, you can go to the governor surveyor's office, general surveyor's office, to go and actually verify documents. But if a survey is being given to you, you can actually get an independent surveyor to verify it for you. But outside of that, you can actually go to the governor surveyor's office to actually go and verify documents. In Lagos, for example, the place is in Ikeja. If you walk in there, Ministry of Land and Work, they can actually help you verify the documents for you. So it depends on the documentation that you were given. But usually, on average, if it's a survey or a survey plan, that is very, very easy. Contact your independent surveyor. If it's any other documentation that you are, lost about, you can go to Governor's Surveyor's Office or Ministry of Land and Works, and they can actually help you verify these documents independently.
Mr. David, did that answer your question? All right. I want to believe that question. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. David. So thank you very much, Mr. TD. That was a beautiful session with documentation simplified. So if any other person has a question, please let's move it to the group so that every question can be answered rather through the course of the day. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining today's class. And I wish everybody a beautiful week. Do have a lovely day.